Hello, my name is Dana Lepofsky and I'm a professor in the Department of Archaeology at SFU, and I've had the great good fortune my entire career of working with Indigenous people in various parts of the world, and we work together on understanding how people live on the land, respect the land, how they've done that in the deep time past, and how they do it today and into the future. And a big part of that is what we would call today food security. And that really means respecting the food you eat and taking care of it, thinking about where it comes from, how it does best in its environment, and making sure that there's enough food, not just for you today, but for your generations into the future that you just don't know yet. And that's a really big difference, I think, than the market economy today, where we think about how to produce the most food right now and are not forward-looking. So working with Indigenous peoples and who are fished and hunted and gathered and farmed inspired me over the years to become a gardener. And you're standing in my garden in one of the Gulf Islands outside of Vancouver. It's a very big home garden. I grow everything from corn to beans to squash to cucumbers, cabbages, tomatoes, you name it, fruits, vegetables. We grow it. It's a very large area. I'm a moderately good gardener. I'm not a great gardener. And I can tell you how much work it takes and how much failure is just built into the system. This year we lost almost our entire crop of tomatoes and potatoes that we planned to have all year. And I had to replant my beans 5 times because of bugs and other critters that were getting them. So think about, if I couldn't just go to the store, what would that mean for the food security of my family? And a big difference from my garden, from the clam gardens that we'll be talking about shortly, is that here we're growing crops that are not from this place. And we're dealing with introduced critters and diseases that are competing against those crops. So we're constantly trying to augment the soil and do different things to make those crops that aren't local flourish here. Very different than Indigenous food security systems. Indigenous ways of interacting with the resources is that they're watching the environment around them and growing, augmenting, producing foods that are from that place, so they can watch what happens in nature and augment that. Very different than me here, bringing in lime, bringing in all kinds of soil amendments to make these introduced foods grow for my family. And even with all the work I do, there's still a lot of failure. So when you could compare that to the clam garden, which is a very, very different system and a way of achieving food security for your family. Okay, so we're standing or sitting, I guess, on a different kind of garden than the one you just saw. This is known in English as a clam garden or a sea garden, but in the language of the Northern Coast Salish in whose territory we are located, it was known as a wuthwuthum, which means a barricade of sorts. And what you can see here very quickly is that you can see this very pancake flat beach that's created by this wall that is partly covered by the tide that's coming in, and we're racing the tide right now. The wall goes quite far down, and it was formed by people rolling rocks to create this terrace wall that then filled in with sediment behind. And what it did is basically it creates this rich zone of clam habitat where clams flourish because the sediment is just right. It's at the right tidal level for butter clams and little neck clams to thrive. And it also means that there's more beach exposed as the tide comes up. So if you can imagine the beach used to be like this, now it's like this, you can see there's all this beach where people could go clamming, even though the tide's coming in. So we're talking about food security and how different this is than my garden. What the Northern Coast Salish here and Indigenous people up and down the coast from Alaska to Oregon did was they watched how nature worked. They watched what butter clams and little neck clams needed to thrive. And they understood that by creating more habitat and enhancing the habitat that was already here, they could increase food production. And we know from talking to elders, from observations, from our archaeological work, that they started doing this at least 3,500 years ago, and that in doing this kind of gardening, enhancing what nature offered by paying attention, being respectful, that they were able to create gardens that were at least as productive or more productive than the very best natural beaches that nature could offer. So thinking about food sustainability, when food security, when we look in the archaeological sites associated with these clam gardens, we see that there is people eating lots and lots of clams. No matter how many clams they're eating, the clams are not getting smaller in size. No matter how many people are living in that area, no matter the population is increasing in a given area, by cultivating clams in clam gardens and paying attention to other things that clams need, like moving seaweed, tilling the soil to aerate them, getting rid of predators like starfish, you made sure that there's enough food, i.e. food security, not only today, but for your children going forward.